Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode, we're going to do a Q3 economic landscape update. So this is our quarterly update about how the economy is going and other important things to know about. Since our last update, due to continued tempered economic growth, this has caused layoffs in certain sectors. Other things to note is that interest rates have actually remained elevated, and the uncertainty around the election has also caused many business owners to pause on making investments. So in today's episode, we're going to go over a variety of questions on the economic landscape. I'll be talking with Omar here about his input on that. Before we get into all the questions and all that good information, Omar, I actually have a fun fact for you. Did you know that bubblegum was actually invented by an accountant?
Seriously?
Seriously, we do more than just numbers.
Are you ChatGPT verified it?
ChatGPT verified it. It shows that accountants are more than numbers.
Can you tell me the fact that we have contributed more to society than just doing tax returns?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. So for all you bubblegum...
Now it can be more proud of Sam as CPA.
Yeah. For all you bubblegum lovers, hey, accountants created that, so we're not just boring people.
Exactly.
That being said, I wanted to kind of jump into our questions. First question I have for you, Omar, is how's the overall economic landscape changed from the beginning of the year to now?
A couple of things that came into play. Inflation obviously has continued to remain high, and that's caused overall profitability for practices to get tempered. We'll kind of talk more into that in a little bit. The higher costs of building a practice have continued to heat up the acquisition market. But we've also had changes such as the fact that especially over the last 3 or 4 months, we've been hearing this more and more so from clients, the fact that the schedules aren't as full as they typically are expecting over the summer. There've been some slowdown in activity, and caused by a variety of issues, whether they're bigger cases, some people are delaying some of those cases to maybe doing it later on because of, being uncertain about the economy or financial things within their own household. We've also, when it comes to professional jobs, white collar jobs, there have been more layoffs, more specifically in Austin, Dallas area, right? Can you think of Texas? There've been more layoffs in those cities, which obviously those guys have insurance, and then they depend on insurance basically to be able to come in and do procedures. That's caused a bit of a mix. So you have overall changes in the market have been the fact that inflation continues to stay high, right? And it continues to impact the cost of running a practice. That includes rent and all that kind of stuff. And then you also have this slowdown that started really, I would say early summer, that some practice owners are feeling. Now, some practice owners aren't feeling it. Some practice owners are they've got their marketing dialed in, they've got their recalls dialed in, they've got their hygiene visits dialed in, and they're just running a really tight ship, and they really haven't seen that much of a movement. And when we talk about movement, really, I'm talking about 5 to 7%. I'm not talking about something drastic that's going to basically, put a practice out of the business, whatever. But 5 to 7% decrease in revenue versus what they were expecting during that period. And all of these things kind of mixing together, it has kind of been what we've seen since our previous update of where practice owners stand and what they're kind of feeling.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can see how certain economic events can impact our, business owners.
Yeah.
That being said, how is that impacting new practices being built for our dental clients versus, acquiring existing?
So that's really interesting because, obviously if you take a step back even to pre-COVID times, right? Building a 5-op office, equipping it, and have it throwing in, maybe $75,000 for working capital, you would basically get a loan around $500,000, so you'd be good. Now you're seeing the fact that these loans are, getting $650,000, $700,000 to start up a new office because construction costs have gone up so much over the last 4 years. And that being said, and then, you have to jumpstart the practice with marketing and building up a patient base. So we've seen the shift started I would say 2022, but we've seen a more aggressive shift towards new dentists and, whether they're graduates with a couple years of experience looking to start their first practice, are really going the route of trying to buy an existing practice that they can fix up, add new equipment to, throw on new paint, modernize it, right? And that's a lot more cash flow effective because there's still some cash flow coming in from a retiring doctor than going and starting fresh. Because of the higher cost of starting these new offices and the increased competition that is, coming into dentistry, especially in the metro areas, right? Especially in your big cities, your Houston, your Dallas, your Austins, your even other bigger cities outside states. The cities have tremendous competition because they're opened up across the street And all these new practices all have, modern equipment, modern appeal, modern marketing, and modern funnels when it comes to bringing in patients, call centers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's made the patient acquisition more challenging, especially in those metro areas and busy areas. And so with all of the things coming into play, we've seen, more and more new young dentists say that I think it's better for me to go and take over a retiring doctor's office where maybe they have $300,000 or $400,000 of collections. So at least I've got some cash flow coming in and I've got a smaller loan, and then I can kind of slowly move and turn that practice towards what I want it to be over time versus, taking on a large debt and then having the challenge of building up a patient base to match that cash outflow of those monthly loan payments and so forth.
That makes sense because you can see the difference in, when around COVID time with the new offices versus now.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a big impact and a big change. You touched on it briefly earlier, but what impact is inflation having on the market,
So inflation is obviously striking across the board. So obviously for dental practices, their bread and butter, is coming from, from families, average age, 35 to 45 that have insurance, they have disposable income to be able to take care of their kids and their families and their requirements. But as inflation is year after year is hitting 8, 9, 9%, and now I know the government's numbers is whatever 2, 3%, whatever, right? But in reality, when we all go to the store and you see if eggs are up, 10%, and milk is up, 18%, and rent is up, 25%, right? So your real inflation number is, 8 to 10% is your real number, right? And so that's being passed to your consumers, and then that's then trickling down to the practice. They're going to think twice about a lot of these procedures that we're going to get done, and so you'll see it becoming more challenging to increase the top line. And on the bottom, then below the line, when you're looking at fixed costs and you're looking at variable costs and overhead, right? So salaries and so forth. Obviously, in order to maintain talent, we heard from a lot of doctors the fact that, retaining top-level hygiene, as the rates have gone up almost 25% over the last few years for hygienists, right? Retaining assistants, retaining the right staff to be able to do those procedures. So the impact inflation has had has been across the board from practices from top line where you have challenges to get patients in the door and get them to accept the treatment, and then you also have challenges of running that business because everything from fixed costs, rent, payroll, supply costs, all those are up across the board. And so you really have to be monitoring, your KPIs to really understand, okay, where can I make movements? Now, we've also seen, practice owners that are really on top of their numbers and they've been able to kind of shift gears and in certain time periods where the bread and butter is lower, they've really focused on doing, and marketing towards higher end cases, and that's kind of leveled out their numbers, right? Those bigger cases, we've seen practice owners shift and it comes to reducing costs by bringing lab in-house, right? So instead of spending 5 to 10% on of your collections from lab and outsourcing that, having that done in-house with 3D technology. So we've seen practice owners battle inflation, as we all have, in trying to be more efficient. But inflation has hit dental practices in the top line of their patients, their consumers are looking to spend less, and the pressure of running an office and being able to make sure that your staff and those individuals are getting paid market, which continues to go up by double digits every year.
Right. And, earlier we discussed, how from quarter 1 to quarter 3 that, interest rates stayed elevated. However, with the Fed rate cut, happening, tell us a little bit about that, how that's going to affect the rest of the year. And then also just next year too, as we go into the new year.
Us being small business owners, just like most dentists are and everything, the 0.5 point rate cut is not going to all of a sudden make us be all right, let's gung-ho on spending, let's go gung-ho on hiring or so forth. So I really don't think the small businesses are really going to feel the 0.5 point rate cut. The individuals who may feel it are going to be maybe those individuals in real estate, right? And they're about to acquire something or they're about to do a project, and that's going to I know that's significant, and that 0.5 point rate cut's going to help them in that interim cost, right? But if you're talking about dental practices, I think that's going to make a big impact. I also think it's going to be a big impact on when it comes to getting dental practice loans and so forth, because 0.5 point is decent, but it's not if you're worried about half a point, which is whatever, a couple $100 a month in interest on a dental practice loan, you're not focusing on the right numbers. So I don't think that's going to make a major play. I think it's obviously the Fed is trying to jump ahead of trying to cool inflation because of it continues to be overheated. And obviously the Fed has said the fact that they want to have multiple other additional rate cuts between now and end of the year and going into beginning of 2025. I don't think the fact that the dentist looking to build practices, buy practices, or get lines of credit or loans from banks are really gonna move the needle because of a 0.5% or 1% rate difference, just because the loan amount isn't that significant.
Right, and so you mentioned that the rate cut won't really impact our practice clients that much. However, you did mention with the real estate that you think that it would. So tell us a little bit about the impact that you think the rate cut will have on real estate.
So I think the fact that your real estate investors and developers that are sitting on the sidelines, they may be motivated, probably not by 0.5%, but probably as, we get closer to 1% cut down rates, may be motivated to start moving off the sidelines and start looking at, getting back into investing and developing. Not in large numbers,
right,
but I think those that have been kind of waiting are going to kind of look and say, okay, we analyzing those numbers and say, okay, let me look at my risk tolerance, and
right,
we may be at a better spot with this rate being cut, because I think a lot of development has slowed down because of just trying to kind of figure out the mathematics behind the rates being so high and the cost being so high, and how do you make a margin on the risk that you're taking.
So, after everything you said about the impact on inflation and the Fed rate cut, what should practice owners be doing in this economic climate to stay ahead?
I've really enjoyed conversations with practice owners that have really been proactive about understanding their metrics and their numbers and looking to figure out how to be more efficient using today's technology, right? Improving their processes, their flows. Bringing technology in-house to cut lab costs, really understanding your numbers and say, okay, where do I have leaks? And the power behind a dental practice is it's so heavy KPI driven, right? If you're not getting enough seats in the door, in the chair, then okay, well, what's causing that, right? What's the driver behind that? Okay, well, what percentage of our patients are no-shows? How many calls are we making before to make sure that those patients know there's an appointment available? What are we doing to make sure that we get them in the chair to do a hygiene treatment, right? That can then allow us to present other treatments to them. What is our treatment acceptance rate? What are our fixed costs looking like, and how do we go and look to mitigate the ones that we don't need, right? It's so KPI driven. The fact that I think successful practice owners should be looking at their 5 major KPIs we talked about before on the show, that looking at your revenue, looking at your fixed costs, looking at your variable costs, looking at your team expenses, and looking at your EBITDA, right? And really sitting down and saying, okay, like, what numbers do I need to tweak in order to get to still be able to earn the same amount or more in this economic climate? And as crazy as it sounds, we look at hundreds of practices every month, right? We've seen those guys that do their homework, and we've seen that we run the 2023 numbers and 2024 numbers, and you see the higher costs in certain buckets. But then you look at the profitability and it's the same. Well, what they've done is what we talked about. It they've looked at the certain KPIs. They've looked at certain costs and said, okay, let me tweak 3% here. Let me do 4% there. Let me tweak the way that we're currently bringing in patients here by 6%. And so those then offset the higher costs that you have below the line. Things that you can't control, you can't control. You can't do anything about it. You can't shoot a stress over it. So let's focus on things we can control, right? And what we can control is basically making sure we're educated and have the right tools in place to look at the X-ray and make our decisions when it comes to our practices, right? And we've seen it with dozens and dozens of clients, that fact that it's very interesting to look at those numbers. Because if you run 2023 and put next 2024, and you see the higher costs at almost every bucket, but then you look at the bottom line, it's the same as last year. Well, that's what you call a soft landing, right? The plane is going through some turbulence, which is inflation, or we're able to land a soft landing. And so I think it's definitely doable, but it does take some engineering work to do.
Awesome. That's all the questions I have today. Omar, thank you for your insight. I think they gave us a clear idea of kind of where the economy is standing right now, the impact interest is having, and inflation, and just kind of things that we can do to stay ahead, right, in this economic climate. So thank you, Omar, for your insight. Everybody, as always, thank you for tuning in today's episode, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
I'm going to use that bubblegum fact to know how when I go home today, just to get more respect around the house.
Awesome.